Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar from the IHS Infinetics team. I'm Joanne Emery. I lead the webinar team at IHS, and we do thank you for joining us. Our focus for this session is going to be around leveraging NFV for carrier Wi-Fi services, and this webinar is co-presented by IHS and our partners Accuris Networks and Benu Networks. So just before we start, I'm going to review some features on your console and then also talk about how you can participate on the webinar. First of all, your console can be customized, so you can move or resize any of the preloaded windows. You can maximize the view of your slides just by clicking the green button on the top right-hand corner of that window. You can also click and drag the bottom right corner of this or of any window to resize your window for your own preference. And also, our slides from this session are available for you to download, so you can access the deck right from our resource list section. And that resource list can be found in the widgets running along the bottom of your console. Look for the button that looks just like a little file folder. And in addition to the slide deck, we have an IHS Infinetics special report on the evolution of carrier Wi-Fi to carrier class. We also have other information for you from our partners, and all of these are related to today's topic and all available for your download. Next, if you happen to experience any technical difficulty today, you can click on the Help widget, and that's the button with the question mark icon, and you can find answers to common technical issues right there. Now, some other ways that you can participate on the webinar. First, we have a Twitter feed running on your console, and you can easily tweet right from the webinar. We're also using the hashtag NFV for carrier Wi-Fi on this webinar. And we're going to have a poll later during the session, so please watch for this. This is a good way to see how your experiences stack up against your peers, and your answers help to let our presenters know a little bit about your experiences, so I do encourage you to participate. Last item I'll mention is our Q&A session, so directly after the presentation, our panel will be taking your questions. We want your input. It's a great chance for you to get answers to specific questions, so you can enter your questions comments anytime during the presentation. Just use the Q&A box on the left side of your screen. We are going to try to get to as many questions as possible, so get your questions in early. And any questions that we can't get to on the webinar, the panel will follow up with you directly. Now I want to introduce our panel, and then we'll get started. Leading our discussion today is Richard Webb, and Richard is the Research Director for Mobile Backhaul and Small Cells at IHS. Richard, hello.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar.
Great. And from Accuris Networks, we're joined by Steve Shaw, and Steve is VP of Marketing at Accuris. Steve, hello.
Good morning. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Joanne, for having us.
Great. And rounding out our panel, we have Clayton Wagar, and Clayton is the Chief Solutions Architect at Benu Networks. Clayton, hello, and good morning to you.
Good morning, Joanne. Thanks for having me on today.
Great. Now we're going to get the presentation started. I'm going to turn the controls over to Richard. So Richard, to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joanne, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. You'll see the agenda slide on screen. We're going to kick off by looking at some of the market trends just to set the context for our discussion. So to start with, we're going to look very briefly at how mobile traffic is changing. Of course, we all know that mobile data traffic is growing, and that's been driven by an expected 9.5 billion mobile subscriptions worldwide by 2020. We can already see that we're well on the way to getting there. But operators also know that traffic is changing in its composition in terms of the services and the applications that are using the network. For example, more smartphone devices are now on the network. That's driving greater mobility of data. We're also seeing more video and high-definition video, and that's driving higher bandwidth per application requirements of traffic. So really we need to understand more than traffic volume. It's important to know where traffic's generated. From our dialogue with operators, we believe that something like 70% is currently generated in indoor locations. And this, of course, has implications for the mobile network too. Even deep density LTE small cells are really very unlikely to be a complete solution for that kind of changing data nature. For one thing, licensed spectrum is finite. Most of it is already in play. So in order to cope with traffic change, not just traffic growth, Wi-Fi is really essential to have. Not just good to have, it's a vital part of the network now. There is some good news, of course. A lot of Wi-Fi is in play too. And despite being unlicensed spectrum and so perhaps being seen kind of as a grassroots technology, somewhat unpredictable, Wi-Fi is now very mature as a technology. It's seen a wealth of innovation, and really that innovation has, if anything, accelerated over the last couple of years. It can be deployed within a broadband access network, either fixed or mobile, to operate to carrier performance criteria and leveraging technologies and innovations such as Hotspot 2.0. It can be much more tightly integrated with the mobile network in particular so that it works in harmony rather than as a standalone network supporting a range of different subscriber and revenue models. So it really is becoming a vital piece of the network. The point is that Wi-Fi isn't exactly everywhere, perhaps, but it's everywhere that we really need it, or it soon will be. It's not so much an alternative to LTE, but really a very strong complement to LTE. The stats on screen show some of the volume of Wi-Fi that's already deployed, the volume of traffic it already supports, and of course the ecosystem of devices behind Wi-Fi, which is becoming increasingly in case on the network side as well as on the devices side, with Wi-Fi being integrated into mobile network equipment, Wi-Fi access point technology being integrated into LTE small cells, and so on. What this means for mobile operators is that Wi-Fi is not just about how much capacity they can add, but where in the network they can add it. Wi-Fi is really an augmentation of the mobile network, and it is really there to enhance user experience, as well as having some very preferential economics so that it actually enhances operational expenditure scenarios. And all of this really is dependent on Wi-Fi deployments, not just being out there in the way that we've always done it, but really making sure that Wi-Fi becomes carrier class, because only then can it really fulfill this role in the mobile network. So this is the point at which you guys get involved. We have a quick poll before we move on. So it's time for the audience to get involved. So you see the question on screen. This is for those of you in the audience who are either operators deploying Wi-Fi or perhaps vendors serving those operators. Let us know what you think the top 3 drivers of Wi-Fi deployment are, and you can choose up to 3 of those that are on screen. So just click your options. Reduce churn, add value to broadband subscriptions, that can be fixed or mobile, increase service throughput, scarcity or cost of licensed revenue, driving people towards unlicensed Wi-Fi, offering dual-mode Wi-Fi mobile services, new access revenues, or some other reason. So I'll give you another 10-15 seconds to click your answers, and then hit submit, please. Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Let's have a look. Okay, so here's the results. Thank you very much for giving us your responses there. Adding value to broadband subscriptions. You've really backed up my early points there, so thank you very much to the audience. It's about what Wi-Fi can do for the mobile network, for the subscriber in terms of user experience. Some very interesting answers there, but no one driver that's really dominating. There's a lot of very good reasons for Wi-Fi to be introduced into the network. Okay, so having set the context, let's look at a little more in a little more depth at some of the challenges for the mobile network in particular, due to the rising volume and changing nature of data traffic. So now I'm going to bring in Steve from Accuris and then Clayton from Benu Networks to expand upon some of those problems and challenges. So over to you first of all, Steve.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Richard, very interesting to see the poll results come back, because I think that validates some of our thinking at Accuris as well, that Wi-Fi in itself can be extremely valuable technology, but some of the most powerful elements that we've seen is adding value to other services in terms of how to make my core broadband service maybe more effective or more valuable. Or, in fact, I was at an event in London the other day, and a guy from a hotel group got up and he spoke about how they use Wi-Fi to try to drive more occupancy rate in their hotel rooms. So it's not Wi-Fi in and of itself, it's how Wi-Fi adds value to your core business. So getting back to the slides a little bit in terms of the service provider and the challenges, that sort of thing, I think we all know we love our smartphones, and particularly watching videos on our smartphones. And that's a double-edged sword. This is exactly what the service provider community has always wanted. They've wanted us to embrace our technology, embrace our phones, and really have a personal communication device. The flip side is we love them so much. We're driving so much usage and so much data. I always like to reflect on, when the iPhone came out, and it really changed the nature of the mobile community all up. And that was just 8 years ago. And it really has transformed what we're doing in the marketplace, moving from sort of mobile networks to really building a mobile internet. And that's really what we've got today. And the challenge around that is spectrum is limited, as you mentioned, Richard. LTE runs in 44 operating bands on 14 different frequency ranges. It's just hard nowadays to find clean, clear blocks where we can put a lot of this mobile data requirements in. Wi-Fi has obviously already carved out its space in the marketplace and has spectrum band blocks that are pretty contiguous and offer a lot of throughput. And clean spectrum is expensive. The German auction just finished. People like to say it raised as if it's a good thing that we're generating revenue for the German government or any government, that sort of thing. From an industry perspective, it cost. I mean, this is cost that gets passed on to us as consumers. $5.5 billion, twice the reserve price. Some analysts thought it might go for more than that because they were doing the digital dividend bands. But this is a lot of money for airspace, and it really puts pressure on the community, mobile community in general, to find a way to effectively monetize that cost and be able to get a return on that kind of an investment. And the reality is we spend most of our time indoors. Before this call, I'm out in California, some of us are on the East Coast, some of us are in Europe, and we're all talking about, it's summer, it's hot, that sort of thing. The reality is we spend most of our time and most of our usage occurs indoors, in the home, in the office, that sort of thing. And that's obviously one of the more challenging places to provide coverage, and it always has been and will continue to be. And like I mentioned, what we're really building now is not a network to make phone calls. We're really building a mobile internet these days. And I think the rise of smartphones and data usage and all that has really caused the service provider community to rethink how they're building and what they're building and how they're building it, and really need to be able to develop new services, innovate faster, be more agile, scale quicker, and develop everything at a lower cost. And really, NFV is providing a framework for how service providers are going to build their networks differently. I think of this, this is a vision that I've always had in the back of my head of two worlds colliding here. You've got sort of on the left there, the mobile world, shall we say, GSM, 3G, very ordered, structured, standards-based. 3GPP has done an excellent job of really laying out a foundation and a framework for how mobile networks can interoperate both internally and externally across the globe. And it has been an unmitigated success. There's absolutely no one who could argue against that. You can take your phone to pretty much any place in the world, turn it on, and get service. And that really is a tribute to the leaders within the mobile space who've been able to really lay out a foundation for building a homogeneous network. And it's been tremendous. Wi-Fi, on the other hand, very community-oriented, unstructured, very individual, that sort of thing. So I got a picture of the two Steves there, Jobs and Wozniak. And in its own way, Wi-Fi has been wildly successful as well. I picked a picture of the guys from Apple because Apple was one of the early companies that really embraced Wi-Fi. I mean, I remember back in the early 90s where they were really pushing Wi-Fi radios into their computers and some of their early handheld devices and that sort of thing. much to the puzzlement of many in the industry, that they had a vision for how the sort of community-based networking and wireless networking could come around and really become a powerhouse going forward. And that's really what we're talking about with carrier Wi-Fi, is these two worlds colliding, and how do we have each side sort of bend and adapt and take the best of both worlds to become really, as Richard was saying, make Wi-Fi, bring Wi-Fi to the table in a mobile environment such that there's sort of peer technologies and really service providers and consumers can get the most of both worlds. That's the both worlds. Let me see, did that push to the next? There we go. So we've seen a little evolution, as I mentioned, 5-10 years ago, really a lot of service providers were sort of ignoring Wi-Fi. It was something like, this is outside the scope, it's outside the 3GPP, it's not something I need to worry about, I'm just going to set it aside for now, that sort of thing. And then over the last couple of years, we've really seen a drive towards a Wi-Fi offload, where Wi-Fi can be a blunt tool for pushing sort of low-value traffic off onto Wi-Fi. It was viewed as, hey, how do I get the more important stuff through on my network, and I'll just sort of hand off all those YouTube videos off to Wi-Fi and really sort of shovel that off to the side, that sort of thing. And really look at cost of delivering data. But then I think as our evolution as we have evolved our thinking in what we're trying to accomplish with our network and what we're trying to do, the idea that this is data to be shoveled off, it has sort of transformed. There's value in the data, and there's value in the information and how people are using their phones, what they're doing with it, that sort of thing. And what we've seen really over the last, say, 2 or 3 years is a real push around carrier Wi-Fi. How do we really tightly integrate or better integrate Wi-Fi with traditional mobile networks? How do I bring this all together in such a way that I can provide a consistent, common experience for my subscribers, make Wi-Fi behave much more like the mobile network with the automated access and control, and really provide that seamless experience such that my consumer doesn't have to worry about whether they're on 2G, 3G, LTE, or Wi-Fi. And that's where we are today, really, with carrier Wi-Fi and a lot of what we wanted to talk about today. And then the future step, Wi-Fi first. There are a lot of people talking about Wi-Fi first. Wi-Fi is the lead RAN, that sort of thing. I think that's a little bit of the future. There's certainly some compelling arguments to be made. We'll see where it all evolves to. I'm not putting my stake in the ground with that one yet, but there's definitely some compelling arguments to be made that Wi-Fi first could be the next step in how we evolve our Wi-Fi. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Clayton and take on the next here. I'll flip that over for you, Clayton. And it'll be you.
Thanks, Steve. I think that as we sit here in mid-2015, what we do know, as was just outlined, is that the convergence of all types of access technologies, all types of RAN technologies, wireline technologies, we as an industry will be very aggressive about making the umbrella of coverage, whether it's wireless or wired, making that umbrella of coverage very seamless for consumers in 5 years' time. And so we begin that journey now by taking a look at what's available in front of us. And we know that we want licensed mobile networks to begin to have the economics and innovation cycles that we have taken advantage of in Wi-Fi. And we know that we want Wi-Fi to start to have the carrier class, carrier grade attributes that we know and love from the trusted mobile networks. And those really come around some functions and services which are inlaid in the network, the collection of which makes it carrier grade Wi-Fi. First and foremost, when we connect as a consumer, when we connect to a network, we want to know that it's secure. We want to know that the network we're connecting to is the one that we think it is. We want to eliminate the nonsense in the news around hacking and data breaches. Clearly, that's in the forefront of the news in many different ways, whether it's Home Depot or Target or all of these folks who have experienced data breaches. We certainly know that Wi-Fi is a contributing factor because of the openness, and we've taken the steps, and we're moving towards trusted Wi-Fi. And that really gets around that trusted, secure experience for consumers. The second thing is a seamless experience, so that the services which are available on one network or in one geographic location are available in every network and every geographic location. That service consistency, the ability to move and roam and have the session continue to work as we move from access point to access point. These type of technologies are fundamental to building a carrier-grade Wi-Fi network. We also want it to be very highly available. One of the things about Wi-Fi, which has been, again, very fantastic operating an unlicensed spectrum, is that we've been able to innovate. But along with that innovation, it could be argued that the user experience and the availability has sometimes been far less than it should be to be a carrier-grade network. And so really these attributes come together to define for us what carrier-grade Wi-Fi is. And on the right here we have a list of network attributes, not an exhaustive one, but a list of network attributes that contribute to that overall experience being carrier-grade. But if you take a look at it in another dimension, what we, again, as an operator wants to do is really move Wi-Fi from being something that's highly commoditized or utility and have our consumer be much more, to have an endearment to that particular service. I spend a lot of time in airports, as many of us do, and there's no lack of drinking fountains all over the place. But I see people walk right by those drinking fountains and they go purchase a $2 or $3 or $4 bottle of water. Why do they do that? If the idea is just to quench your thirst, then the drinking fountain should be just fine. It should meet the need. Well, in fact, there's maybe an argument to be made around convenience or around taste or around brand affinity or around consistency. All of these type of things might contribute to the decision of a consumer to go and purchase that premium product. That's what we want to do with Wi-Fi. We want to move it from being a utility, something that we just simply latch onto and expect it to be just the base connection. And we want consumers to begin to take a look at Wi-Fi in the same vein as they do as any other mobile network. We want them to trust it. We want them to know that the service will be consistent. We want the experience to be very high. And that's really how we see the product side of Wi-Fi moving forward over the next several years. And building a carrier-grade network is really the entrant to that. Looking at those network functions and how we put them into the network, we have lots of choices. Of course, we live in a world that for the past 20 to 30 years in carrier networks, we've been installing hardware and for both scale as well as performance. And now we are, as an industry, very quickly transitioning to both a hardware and software-based environment where the network functions live not just in a bespoke piece of hardware that's built by a vendor, but as software elements that can be deployed on commodity hardware and managed in more of a DevOps type of model. And we are making significant progress. There are, of course, working groups and vendor working groups that are working to bring these standards and mature them as quickly as possible. They are still evolving. It's a highly balkanized environment right now, while there are some reference stacks and reference architectures. As we talk to carriers, we see there are very specific needs and requirements that end up making less of a standard from an NFV standpoint. It's a different operational model. That's probably the most significant challenge that we see as we talk to our customers, that we have operations folks, network operations folks who very traditionally have been a rack and stack and speeds and feeds, pluggables kind of environment. Now you're moving to a very software, agile-based operational environment. That's a challenge, one that some customers are tackling very successfully. And of course, it changes the business model and the relationship between the vendor and the service provider, and whether things are offered in strictly a CapEx model, traditional CapEx model, or whether there's more of a shared OpEx model. So these are the type of challenges and what's in the front of our mind as we look towards an NFV world and how we put these functions in the network that enable carrier-grade, the construction of carrier-grade Wi-Fi networks. So with that, I'm going to pass it back for an agenda slide.
Thanks very much, Clayton. So we've heard a little about perceptions of Wi-Fi and how mobile operators kind of spurned it as a technology going back several years, and now things are gradually changing, but there's still quite a long way to go. If we're really going to make carrier class Wi-Fi part of the mobile network, part of the way in which networks of the future operate in a very seamless fashion. Clayton just started talking a little bit about how NFV can be leveraged as part of that new future environment. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail now. So I'm going to pass actually straight back to Clayton to pick up on some of those points and tell us about what the kind of solution environment looks like in that transition of Wi-Fi.
Absolutely. So if you look at, again, those collections of functions and services and how we build a carrier-grade Wi-Fi network with the intent of bringing it into that same user experience as a licensed mobile network, really one of the key elements of the design is to offer service consistency through the virtualization of the capabilities of the network. And really that gets down to taking the access points, whether they are in someone's home, whether they are in an outdoor environment, whether they're in a small business, no matter where those access points are, and driving the services for the consumer in the carrier cloud. And so this is actually very highly consistent with a licensed mobile network architecture. As you power on your Android or your iPhone, the IP services that you receive are actually anchored in a centralized location in a licensed mobile network. As you travel overseas, that continues to, you build effectively an overlay, a service tunnel back to your home network. And so that same type of deployment is really very typical now for carrier-grade Wi-Fi networks. Here labeled in this diagram, the virtual service edge, this is where the NFV capability is deployed in the carrier cloud. It could be highly centralized in a regional data center. It could be out at near the edge of the access network. But really the idea is IP services like address assignment, address translation, all the policy enforcement, all of the V4, V6 deployment, all of that happens in a centralized environment. And what that allows carrier to do is get really terrific leverage on both the concurrency, so that if access points are unused, you're not consuming resources or driving expense for access points that may be lighter used than others. You're getting a lot of leverage on innovation cycles. So if you have a single point to deploy services and you want to upgrade those services, make changes, do A/B testing on services, you can do that and spin up these NFV instances in a very rapid fashion. And you don't have to then drive capabilities and services into the access point. That's really the death knell, if you will, for innovation cycles, is trying to get all of your AP vendors to have the same set of services and have that service consistency. So doing that in an overlay type of environment is done through using service tunnels. Here labeled as the L2 tunnels. There's a variety of protocols which can be used, but it leverages that underlying IP network that we've built over the last 20 or 30 years in the carrier space. And so this type of architecture has been highly successful. We'll talk about a case study in just a little while during the webinar of one North American operator. And the takeaway here is that it drives simplicity to the left, which has a direct impact on economics and capability to the left of an access point to be best in class network termination for Wi-Fi and for the tunnel. And it drives the business logic to the right and gives us this decentralization and, again, the innovation of centralization. A good friend of mine in the industry has a phrase, and it says, distribute what you must and centralize what you can. And I think in this case, it's going to serve very well to building carrier-grade Wi-Fi networks. Not to leave out an important point, from an IP services standpoint, we've talked about the deployment there, but there are some very important leverage around back office interaction. And to talk about that, I'll pass it back over to Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, this is obviously a key point in pulling the whole system together, the ability to now integrate some of the access network complexity back into existing systems. So whether you're trying to connect your Wi-Fi access into a mobile network, cable network, a fixed network, a more traditional sort of GSM network versus an EPC and an LTE type network, how that gets connected in and how we simplify and normalize that interface back into the service provider core is key. And that's something that certainly Accuris is heavily involved with, maintaining a common subscriber access control or policy interface, ensuring a consistent billing experience, that sort of thing, really sort of normalizing the complexity that goes along there. A lot of this is done more at the control plane, more at a signaling level type thing. Therefore, it's very amenable to an NFV type environment. And as Clayton was saying, definitely something that can be centralized and consolidated back in your service provider data center, and deliver it as a virtualized service that can provide that massive scalability that's probably needed to be able to deal with all of the different interfaces and connectivity requirements for subscribers as they try to move seamlessly across the different types of service provider Wi-Fi, but also across the regular network as well, across the cellular network and the LTE network going forward. So to the extent that we can simplify the edge and simplify the experience for the subscriber and really beef up our business logic on the back end and do so through NFV technology, I think we've got a real platform for success for service providers going forward. With that, we'll send it over to Richard. Take us forward there.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Before we move on, just a quick reminder that if you have any questions for our Q&A, you can submit those at any time using the Q&A part of the On24 webinar interface. Just click in there, type in your question, and we'll sort through those and get to those at the end of the content part of today's webinar. So do keep firing them through. That is important for us. Okay, so we've heard the theory of transitioning to carrier-grade Wi-Fi and something of the role that NFV plays within that potentially, but how are operators actually going about using Wi-Fi? Let's hear some of those real-world examples. I'm going to ask Steve to come in first on these. We have several from him and then also from Clayton as well. So over to you first, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Wi-Fi as a tool is fantastic. There's just a couple of ways it can be applied, and hopefully we'll cover at least some examples and get you as the audience thinking about different ways that Wi-Fi has been applied successfully across carrier networks and maybe have more of a discussion as we go forward into the Q&A. One of the customers that Accuris has had that has been successful with Wi-Fi is Mobily in the Middle East. They've got a pretty solid mobile network, but costs are expensive and there's huge demand, particularly in dense urban areas, and a lot of demand for increased indoor usage, particularly where coverage was a little spotty and a little difficult to get in. And Mobily turned to a carrier Wi-Fi deployment. Typically in the industry we call that offload. I think some people are starting to call that onload. How do I get the data from my Wi-Fi access points back into my mobile core so that I can ensure that consistent experience and really have good insight into my subscribers so I know who's doing what and be able to monetize that experience. Mobily has been able to really bring together Wi-Fi and LTE together to offer a seamless experience for their subscribers and extend it out to non-SIM devices as well, tablets and laptops as well, to provide a consistent experience tied to a single subscriber identity. This has been a pretty successful use case for us and is certainly a model for how service providers can seamlessly blend Wi-Fi with their LTE deployments. Another opportunity is to add Wi-Fi to a roaming product or a roaming service offer. So Accuris has worked with AT&T to create an extension to their mobile roaming data plan, which they call Passport. Today, subscribers who join the AT&T Passport plan get access to Wi-Fi access points around the world. So AT&T has a pretty aggressive program where they're going out and signing up Wi-Fi property owners around the world, and then they have an application that subscribers get. So when you sign up for Passport, you get an SMS, you get a text with a link to the app, either in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, where you can download this app, and the app provides you with a map of hotspots for your location, but it also authenticates. It manages the seamless authentication and access of your device onto those hotspots as well. So using Wi-Fi to kind of add value to your existing mobile data plan is something that AT&T is looking to do. Actually, there's information on their website if you'd like more, or if you want to join or become part of the hub too. AT&T is always looking for customers to join in on this. This is a sort of a global initiative that they've taken from there. And then the third use case I wanted to cover is a Wi-Fi calling. Unfortunately, we're not able to go with a logo or a name just yet, but obviously the Wi-Fi calling is sort of jumped into this limelight just recently, specifically with the addition of Wi-Fi calling capabilities in the latest release of iOS. And service providers are now looking at how they can add their either IMS-based or other VoIP-based services directly to a Wi-Fi enabled device, and how they can provide voice services seamlessly when the subscriber's on Wi-Fi. This sort of rounds out what I would call the user experience. The ability to get on the internet with Wi-Fi is certainly important, but for a mobile service provider, the ability to have a consistent user experience, to be able to make phone calls and get texts and messaging the exact same way you do over LTE is critical. And therefore, we see an opportunity around adding Wi-Fi and carrier Wi-Fi calling to mobile service provider plans is going to be absolutely essential going forward. The move to LTE, the move to voice over LTE, and then the move to Wi-Fi calling and voice over Wi-Fi is going to be just sort of a natural evolution of how we see service providers moving forward. There's some complexity on the back end and how that all happens, and that's something where Accuris can come in and help, like I said, really normalize the experience such that subscribers can get that common experience whether they're on LTE or Wi-Fi. So with that, let me pass it over to Clayton. He'll go through a couple of use cases as well.
Thank you very much. So, at Benu, we talk about this, one of the most significant deployments that we have, which is with a large North American service provider. Similarly, we cannot put a logo. While the shape and size of them will speak to it, I think. They wanted to do a project where they took the existing home gateways, Wi-Fi enabled home gateways in customers' homes and provide an amenity service, an amenity Wi-Fi service that has the service provider's SSID broadcast inside people's homes. And really the idea for doing so was the convenience factor of having people who are subscribers to this particular operator can then have the ubiquity and that umbrella of coverage no matter where they go, outdoor environments, stadiums, and in folks' homes. And the example I love to give is, fantasy football draft is coming up here in the fall, and I go over to my buddy's house and we're going to do our football draft, and he doesn't have to go and give out his Wi-Fi network and key to the 20 or 30 people that might show up to have fun that night. We're just going to basically look for that particular operator's logo, because most of us happen to be subscribers anyway. And if we're not, there's a free 2-hour amenity service that's there. So this has been extraordinarily successful for this particular operator. They're able to deploy 10 million hotspots in under 2 years' time by doing a firmware upgrade and by centralizing the network function, as we talked about before. They're currently seeing north of 15% busy hour concurrency. What that means is that at a busy hour, so very typically at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, upwards of 15% of those 10 million home spots will be active and have a device active on them. And although this operator has a very robust outdoor footprint, they're seeing that a majority of their traffic, as measured by bandwidth, is coming from those home spots. So they're being very actively used, not just for lightweight tasks like email and browsing, but also for video delivery. And so again, this has been a very highly successful deployment for us for service provider Wi-Fi. Where that goes from here is really what we're working with our customers now is virtual CPE. So the idea is we're taking these Wi-Fi networks and we're not just adding the base connectivity, which is user to internet. We're also adding that connectivity user to user, so that a collection of devices, whether it's in a single geographic location or spread out over many geographic locations, a collection of devices can have the same in-home service experience that they might have in today's home networks, so that we can effectively take the business logic from the CPE, move it to the other side of the access network, but still have all of those home discovery protocols so that we can have file and print working, we can have DLNA, AirPlay, all of these things. And so that's really the next major step that we see in carrier-grade Wi-Fi, is adding that context awareness for people so that they can leverage the home discovery protocols, which we really know and love. And I would add that not only are we seeing this in Wi-Fi, but also licensed mobile operators are looking to add the same sort of context awareness. So this speaks again to that 5-year vision where we are targeting RAN technologies to be one big pool umbrella of coverage. We're going to see this innovation first in the Wi-Fi space, and this is a very important area of research and development for us and for our definitional customers. And so with that, I'll pass it back.
Great. Thank you. So let's hear now specifically how our two sponsors are positioned in this space and what solutions they're bringing to the market. And we'll go through this section. We'll draw a few conclusions, and then we'll be into the Q&A. So just one last reminder about getting those questions in. We've got some really good questions coming in, but please keep them coming as well. So let's see what, first of all, Benu Networks are bringing into this market. Clayton, over to you.
Thanks very much. So Benu focuses very singularly on this idea of deploying services in the operator core. And so we have been working again with our definitional customers, those mentioned in the case study, as well as some other large operators, on defining this virtual service edge, which is our vision of the service delivery for mobile devices. That's not just for Wi-Fi devices that we know today, like smartphones and tablets and laptops. It's also for devices in the Internet of Things that's coming online, whether it's a thermostat or a watch or a refrigerator, or now, if you read last month, there are actually Barbie dolls that will have Wi-Fi in them so that you can configure your Barbie doll and personalize it when you get it home. It's just really unimaginable, the number of things which will be connected and need service. Many of those things will not have a browser and the ability to do things like captive portals and all that. So the virtual service edge is our technology which allows us to offer services using that overlay leverage model in an operator core. It's offered today as both a hardware and software instantiation, and over time we expect that operators will go according to their plans, will consume more and more of the software pieces. It can live, as I mentioned before, in a very highly centralized environment, perhaps in a regional data center or in a national data center. But as the scale requirements and as the economics of a given network dictate, it can be moved closer to the access edge as cloud technologies are deployed farther out there. So maybe smaller instances, many smaller instances out towards the edge versus a larger instances in the core. This is the beauty of NFV, right? It gives us that flexibility, that elasticity from core to edge, and gives us a much better economic model and operational model around that as well. The virtual service edge also interworks with not only the commodity internet, if you will, but with packet cores, 3G and 4G packet cores, and also does some interworking and roaming for Wi-Fi customers as well today, as well as the required back office integration, and looking forward to a world where we have bespoke custom service chains for each individual device, so that my device gets a different service chain than my teenage boys in the house. Perhaps they have a parental control filter or time of day restrictions, and I, as the parent, don't have those in line. So this is the type of richness and device addressability that we supply with the virtual service edge technology. And now I'll pass it over to Steve.
Thanks, Clayton. And sort of in partnership there, sitting behind a lot of what Clayton laid out is how we go ahead and connect that all into the service provider core network, and that's really where Accuris shines through its Wi-Fi server. I will point out that today our Chief Technology Officer, Aidan Dillon, posted a little bit on Accuris' view of NFV evolution and how that impacts our own product development internally and some of the new products we have coming down the pipe. So if you want to head over to accurisnetworks.com, you can read a little about what our CTO sees in terms of how that's all going forward. And really what we were saying is going forward now, Accuris is going to make our products available in VNF format, specifically in a KVM OpenStack environment and supporting a container environment as well. So we're taking this on and wanted to use this webinar as an opportunity to kind of bring forward our vision on how NFV is going to evolve what we do in the marketplace and really deal with some of the scalability issues and the growth issues that Clayton laid out in terms of IoT and all of the things that are going to happen there. And Accuris is really bringing in subscriber access, policy management, billing. The red bits there are indicative of products and services that Accuris provides. We did just the other day add a Wi-Fi billing component as well that does billing and settlement specifically for roaming opportunities. So we've got more of a complete solution there end to end. We also have a captive portal product that provides a common interface across multiple access networks. So many service providers have multiple vendors, and they might have multiple partnerships in terms of how subscribers can get onto the network through Wi-Fi. We provide some of that commonality such that the subscriber gets that common user interface and front end, particularly in a captive portal type environment. And then, of course, we've got our own device client application out there as well, specifically for the roaming environment where you're looking for access points and that sort of thing. What Accuris is trying to do really is simplify how service providers deal with active Wi-Fi, rather than it being this collection of multiple protocols and vendors and access methods and that sort of thing. How do we normalize it and really plug into specifically a mobile network's core such that Wi-Fi becomes a seamless extension? And that's where Accuris really shines and has provided a lot of value, specifically in I think providing our technology in a virtualized environment really is going to add value to the service provider as they look to grow capacity and scalability in a Wi-Fi environment going forward. And as I said, offload, roaming, calling are all applications that we see happening a lot, and we've got quite a bit of traction in the marketplace. So, and with that, I think we are about to wrap up. So let me pass it back over to Richard there for a conclusion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Clayton, for your excellent contributions to the prepared material part of today's webinar. I'm just going to spend a minute or two recapping a few of the key points we've covered, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. So we spoke at the top of the webinar about data growing exponentially, something we all know, and also the importance of that hyperdense network being essential for mobile and wireless broadband services. But LTE alone isn't going to cope, so Wi-Fi has a huge role in supporting this, but it has to be carrier class. It really has to be part of those networks, not just a standalone kind of ad hoc support to the mobile network. It's really got to be part of that network. Well, what does that mean? It means incorporating innovations such as Hotspot 2.0, SAMOG, adaptive antennas, and so on and so forth. There's an awful lot that's happened in the Wi-Fi environment to improve the technology, not just in terms of the network performance, but in terms of how it can be secured and trusted and integrated into the mobile network environment. So those things are very important. At the same point, we've seen the maturation of NFV, and carrier Wi-Fi is very much an astute place to begin with NFV implementation. Done right, it's something that's really going to support new service models for Wi-Fi, managed services, location-based services, Wi-Fi roaming. All these things really come into play once carrier Wi-Fi is robustly deployed. And as you've heard a little bit, vendors such as Benu Networks and Accuris Networks have solutions to support operators in that transition. Okay, so thank you very much for your time so far. We've got some very interesting questions that have now come in. So if Steve and Clayton are feeling nicely warmed up, I'm going to pitch in with a couple that we've had come through. One that I kind of, when we were preparing the webinar, we pretty much anticipated was going to be something that we got asked about, and that is LTE-U and LTE-LAA. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it is important to clarify how things like LTE-U are going to impact the use of carrier Wi-Fi. I mean, that's the mobile network trying to steal back a bit of Wi-Fi spectrum, right, isn't it? So is this a good thing or not such a good thing? Who wants to kick off and share some thoughts on the impact of LTE-U? It's a webinar in itself, perhaps.
Well, look, I'll say we know how to connect. We know how to connect these networks in the core, right? We know how to offer seamless services on the core side of these networks, and for the most part, converged operators have been reluctant to do so, and non-converged operators really don't care, right? The interworking between Wi-Fi and mobile networks is really at its infancy. Where I think it's interesting is not expressing opinion or another on LTE, LTU. I think that's where the front of the battle of integrating these networks is going to take place. Interestingly, is in the RAN. I'm an old RF guy, right? So I'm concerned with resource fairness, especially in unlicensed Part 15 kind of stuff. But it's got to happen. We've got to talk as an industry about how we bring these mobile networks together, not just in the RAN, but in the back office, in the core, in the services delivery. I mean, that's really what the takeaway for me with the LTU battle is going to be. Is it's just opens the discussion on how to bring these networks together over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting that it's that convergence now getting pushed all the way to the edge, and how do I sort of blend the best of both worlds? Honestly, I think if the Wi-Fi side of the house can deliver the secure, consistent experience that mobile operators are looking for over licensed, it would seem to me that these can live side by side, probably without LTE, AA, and the LTE stuff. I mean, why not just use Wi-Fi? Why not just use LTE? Yes, we can argue both sides of the coin. But I think Wi-Fi does deliver a lot of what service providers are looking for today, and I think if we can just add some of that back-end integration and connectivity and security and those sorts of things, we're going to have a pretty good network going forward.
Great. Thanks very much. Okay. Let's see what we've got next. Okay, we've talked about some of the innovations that have happened around Wi-Fi, one of those being Hotspot 2.0. But if we're going to go ahead with this NFV-driven evolution of the network, what does an operator do first? Evolve the access network to Hotspot 2.0 or the core network, develop that using NFV? What's the kind of phased step of, putting these innovations in place, these evolutions of the network?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of codependency there. I think that they can come simultaneously in parallel, if you will, or one can drive the other. If you have a vendor who is able to support your TWAG Hotspot 2.0 needs by deploying an NFV faster, then that's what you're going to end up doing. It's going to be the product side of the house, I think, will end up driving a lot of those decisions, and NFV is just an enabler to me at the end of the day. It's not in and of itself, it's not something that changes the game. It's an enabler for the products which are deployed. I mean, I think this is the year, in the last 6 months of this year, you'll see a tremendous push for Wi-Fi only operators and wireline operators that have a robust Wi-Fi footprint. You'll see a tremendous push towards Hotspot 2.0, pushing certificates and SIM-based authentication and all the things we know and love about that. It's just the consumers are ready to trust the networks again, given the horrific data breaches. I've had 4 different credit cards in the last year because of these things. So it's got to happen. We've got to lock down the networks and trust them. And I think that NFV will be an enabler there, but not necessarily a dependency.
Okay, thanks very much.
Good point.
I've got a question that kind of picks up on that. Steve, did you want to come in on that last question?
I was just going to say, I think it's time, both from as Clayton was saying, for subscribers to trust and move forward, but also I think many Wi-Fi providers are saying, hey, I see Hotspot 2.0 as an opportunity to really start monetizing, right? And really put it into, say, an AT&T roaming pool and make it available to a broad swath of customers and make it much easier to use. So I can see, we're sort of moving into the next generation of infrastructure upgrade there, and with any luck, it'll put so much demand on the network that NFV becomes a requirement to be able to scale to meet that demand. So yeah, I see them moving in parallel forward.
Okay. So taking up that point about the trusted network, this may be a fairly quick answer. What does that mean? Do you need to set up an IPsec tunnel? What does trusted mean in this particular environment?
Certainly a place to start.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think certainly that's a place to start. I think there's a lot of trust associated with sort of SIM-based devices already, and extending that into an IPsec environment and data encryption, that sort of thing, is certainly important. SIM-less devices, it gets a little more tricky But, honestly, Richard, a lot of the data breaches that we're talking about happen irrespective of how encrypted the access network is. I mean, it's stuff that sort of sits on top, and I think, there's a lot of layers to security, to securing my data, and making sure that the network is secure is step one, but there's a lot of stuff that happens above sort of what we're talking about in terms of policy and access and control, specifically with applications, that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah, I mean, IPsec clearly is for untrusted access networks, or if you want to ride the commodity internet, you'll want to use something like IPsec in order to guarantee the trust model around your users' traffic. It is going to be, a collection of technologies link by link, starting with Hotspot 2.0 in the RAN for Wi-Fi, and then, if you're an access provider, cable operators have sort of a built-in security model into their access technologies, and so they tend to draft off of the back of that and not involve IPsec. But if you have an untrusted network, you'll need to bring in, IPsec or TLS tunnels or something in order to transport the traffic. It really is, as Steve said, a collection of technologies. Many of them are layered that end up fitting into this, again, from a product name, a trusted network.
Okay. Okay. What about quality of service? What do you need to do with Wi-Fi to ensure high QoS?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of activity around WMM and ensuring the quality of experience on the Wi-Fi network itself, and the network functions which live in both the cloud, the NFV that we talked about today, as well as the access network, will ultimately need to be orchestrated, and that will lead to a much more robust quality of experience model than we have today on Wi-Fi. There are some working groups. One that immediately comes to mind is in Cable Labs for cable operators worldwide, and they're doing quite a bit of work on how to express and convey that QoS information across the entire network, so that users have that high level experience from end to end. Clearly there are challenges with Wi-Fi, because the farther you get from the access point, some of the edge cases for signal strength and for MCS, lower MCS, you start to really have something that, quote unquote, might be out of your control. This is where coverage is important, right? Having the best possible radio technology, have the best possible coverage, multiple access points. But in terms of being able to convey that through the network and guarantee fairness and experience across for user traffic, a lot of very interesting activity that will come to fruition over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Anything more to add, or shall I take our next question?
Okay. Let's get one more in before the top of the hour, yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Do Wi-Fi property owners sell access to multiple service providers or exclusive access to single service providers? Anyone want to take that one?
I'm happy to jump in. I think the days of exclusive access are going to be over here really soon. I think what the vision that we see at Accuris is the ability for service providers or property owners to really monetize their network across the board and make it available in an easy fashion to sort of anyone and anything that would like to access it. And if that property can become part of a pool that's easily accessible by subscribers, whether they be subscribers roaming from outside of a country, domestically, looking to offload, whatever, there's really an opportunity to get more usage on that Wi-Fi network and really become a value add, I think, to the mobile network or the mobile industry as a whole. So I think really we're going to start to see people move away from exclusive access, just because there's going to be a plethora of opportunities for them to monetize with a wide variety of vendors.
And I'll just add, this is where service providers have a distinct strategic advantage, is the ability to come into a geographic location and offer a very compelling multi-tenant, vanity to private networks to the high-speed wireline. They really have a tremendous advantage here over the top players who might come in and do the same thing. That customer relationship, the end-to-end service capability is, again, I view that as the strategic advantage for service providers. And we spend a lot of time with our customers developing products that help them exploit that.
Great. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in terms of the questions. Steve, Clayton, thank you very much. Tremendous input there. I'm just going to hand over to Joanne Emery, who's going to wrap. Thank you very much for your questions. We'll follow up with all of those questions coming in, particularly those we didn't get to answer. Thanks again. Joanne, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yep, we will follow up with the questions. We get a lot of questions here we couldn't answer, so thanks, everyone, for that. Again, I'll thank Richard and, of course, the panel for a great presentation, Steve from Accuris, Clayton from Benu Networks, and to both teams for putting together a great presentation today. And also thank you in the audience for joining us and sharing your time today. An archived version of this webinar will be available shortly, so you'll receive a follow-up email with more information about our access to the archive. You can view this again or share it with a colleague you think they would benefit from the content. Also, you're going to see a short survey pop up. We'd like you to respond to that. We want your feedback about this topic and any future topics you'd like to see from the IHS team. And lastly, we do have more webinar topics available in our library for viewing, and we'll have more topics coming for you. We hope to see you again soon. So that's all for this session. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.